Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you about a case that happened in South Korea. A mother and daughter were murdered in their home, and the husband had a solid alibi for a period of time. However, the case remains highly controversial due to disputes over the victim's time of death. It's known as the Korean OJ Simpson Case, or the dentist mother and daughter murder case. The story takes place in Seoul, in the Han River Basin in the northwestern part of South Korea. In the northwest of Seoul lies Yeonpyeong-gu, a major transportation hub connecting Seoul, Uijeongbu and Paju. The main character of our story is Choi Soo-hee, 31 years old, a professional dentist. Her husband Lee Do-haeng, 33 years old, is a surgeon. The two married in 1989. After their marriage, they opened a dental clinic together. Choi Soo-hee started working at the family dental clinic. Since the clinic did well, the family never had to worry about money. They lived a comfortable and prosperous life. In 1993, the couple welcomed a daughter and named her Lee Hwa-young. The family of three lived in apartment 708 on the 7th floor of a building in Bulgwangdong, Yeonpyeong-gu, Seoul. Let's take a look at the apartment's layout together. Here's the entrance, followed by a small foyer. To the left of the hallway is a utility room, then the kitchen. Next to the kitchen is the living room. To the right of the hallway is a second bedroom, usually unoccupied. Then there's the bathroom, and beside it the master bedroom. At night, the couple and their daughter slept in this room. By 1995, they had been married for 6 years, and their daughter was 2 years old. At that time, the husband was borrowing money to build a private cosmetic surgery hospital and was preparing for its grand opening. Their family's life and career could be described as promising, with a bright future ahead. However, an unexpected tragedy struck. Next, let's go back to June 12, 1995. On June 12, 1995, a Monday, around 8:45 a.m., a plume of white smoke suddenly rose from an apartment in Bulgwangdong. The building's security guard noticed it and rushed upstairs to investigate. They found smoke pouring out of apartment 708 on the 7th floor. When the guard reached the door, he knocked urgently, but no one answered. The door was locked from the inside and he couldn't get in. It seemed like a fire was raging inside. Sensing an emergency, the guard immediately called the fire department. 10 minutes later, around 9:20 a.m., firefighters arrived at the scene. When they entered apartment 708, they saw flames raging fiercely in the master bedroom. The middle section of the wardrobe had burned. Clothes inside were charred black. The bed sheets next to it were scorched, and the wallpaper had peeled and melted away. The firefighters quickly extinguished and controlled the blaze. Then they checked the rest of the apartment for other hazards. One firefighter went into the bathroom to assess the situation. There he was horrified to discover a woman and a young girl in a bathtub full of water. Both were dead. Witnessing this tragic scene, the firefighting team immediately contacted the police. After receiving the report, the police swiftly sent officers to the scene. As sirens blared, numerous officers arrived, sealed off the area, and began their investigation. The woman found dead in the bathroom was Choi Soo-hee, 31 years old. The other was her 2-year-old daughter, Lee Hwa-young. Choi Soo-hee was lying face down in the water-filled tub. Her upper body was bare, with only a pair of underwear on her lower body, pulled down to her knees. There was slight bleeding on her neck and arms, with clear strangulation marks around her throat. She was still wearing contact lenses. Her daughter, Lee Hwa-young, was lying on her back in the tub, wearing a short-sleeved shirt on her upper body and a diaper on her lower body. She also showed signs of strangulation, though no other obvious wounds were visible. Forensic examination confirmed Choi Soo-hee had not been assaulted. The cause of death for both was asphyxiation. This was clearly a murder case. The police launched a thorough investigation at the crime scene. They found some unwashed dishes in the sink, a baby bottle on the dining table, and a pair of Choi Soo-hee's glasses on the bathroom vanity. Her wallet was discovered in the master bedroom, containing 518,001, about 430 USD. The apartment door was locked tight from the inside, and the windows showed no signs of damage. There were no indications of a break-in or a struggle in apartment 708. Apart from the fingerprints of the family of 3, no other fingerprints were found, and no external murder weapons were uncovered. From outside the building, there were 2 possible routes to apartment 708. The first required passing through the security office. The police questioned the guard on duty that day, who confirmed no strangers had entered or exited the building. The second route was an emergency exit on the right side of the first floor, but it was blocked by a metal grate and tightly locked. No one from outside could access it. While the police were investigating, Choi Soo-hee's husband, Lee Do-haeng, returned home after learning his wife and daughter had been murdered. He was devastated. Once he calmed down, the police asked about his whereabouts that day. He said, "Today was the official opening of my private hospital. After breakfast at 7 a.m., I went to the hospital alone. The mother and daughter ate breakfast with me. When I left, everything was fine. I arrived at the hospital by 8 a.m. for the opening ceremony. Plenty of people were there who can vouch for me." Let's check out a map of the area together. Here's the apartment's location, and here's the hospital's location. It takes about an hour to travel between the two. According to the security guard's statement, he saw Lee Do-haeng leave the apartment at 7 a.m., which perfectly matches the husband's account. At the crime scene, no cash or valuables were missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. The police theorized that the 2 victims were killed in the master bedroom. After the act, the killer deliberately removed Choi Soo-hee's clothes to stage a fake assault scene. Then, the perpetrator dragged the mother and daughter into the bathroom tub and set fire to items in the master bedroom to destroy evidence. Before leaving, the killer locked the door to delay discovery. Based on the scene, it seemed to be a personal vendetta murder. The police believed the killer might have been close to Choi Soo-hee and her daughter. With just a single lead, the perpetrator's identity could be easily uncovered, so they used arson to erase evidence. The police then investigated Choi Soo-hee's personal relationships. A colleague revealed that Choi Soo-hee was having an affair with a man, possibly an interior designer. The police tracked down her lover, but he hadn't been at the apartment during the time of the crime and had a solid alibi, so he was temporarily ruled out as a suspect. For unknown reasons, he later left South Korea, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The police later found a diary belonging to Choi Soo-hee with an entry that read, "I thought of him while my husband and I were sleeping together." This him was likely her interior designer lover. Based on these clues, the police suspected Lee Do-haeng might have known about his wife's affair. In a fit of rage, he could have killed both mother and daughter. Indeed, Lee Do-haeng had a strong motive, but whether he acted on it requires digging into the exact time of the victims' deaths. Forensic experts conducted an autopsy. At 11:30 a.m. on the day of the incident, the victims' bodies showed livor mortis spots. Let me briefly explain this for you to visualize. After death, these spots appear as blood stops circulating. Blood in the cardiovascular system loses energy and pools along the veins in the lower parts of the body. The upper body's blood vessels empty out, while those below clog up. For example, if there are many spots on the back of the thighs and calves, it might suggest the person was sitting for a long time after death. If the spots are evenly spread across the back and buttocks, they likely died lying down. The formation and development of these spots occur in 3 stages: accumulation, diffusion, and infiltration. Accumulation typically happens 2 to 4 hours after death, though it can range from 30 minutes to 6 to 8 hours. Pressing a finger on the spots during this stage causes capillary blood to flow to surrounding areas, temporarily fading them. But once the pressure is released, blood flows back and the spots reappear. The diffusion stage usually occurs 12 hours after death, though with some people it can be as quick as 8 to 10 hours. At this point, Pressing the spots makes them fade slightly. After shifting positions, original spots don't disappear easily, and new ones don't form readily. Typically, these spots form and stabilize within 4 to 12 hours post-mortem, locking into the lower parts of the body as new spots emerge in the diffusion stage. A hemoglobin-stained fluid seeps into the body's tissues. By the second day after death, this becomes more obvious, penetrating not just tissue gaps but also cells coloring them, known as livor mortis. When Choi Soo-hee was found, she was face down in the tub with many spots on her front, including scratches on her right thigh. In such a scenario, death would have occurred 6 to 8 hours before the autopsy. Based on these marks, the estimated time of death was early that morning, between 3:30 and 5:30 a.m. After death, the body's muscles gradually stiffen, contract slightly, and joints lock up, like the mouth unable to open or limbs unable to bend. This typically starts 3 to 4 hours after death, spreading from head to neck, hands and feet. It begins to subside 24 to 48 hours later, and the body softens again. Choi Soo-hee's finger joints were rigid. Based on this rigor mortis, her time of death was estimated at 6 to 12 hours prior, between 11:30 p.m. on June 11th and 5:30 a.m. on June 12th. The autopsy revealed about 1 pound of undigested food in her stomach, seaweed soup, rice, cabbage, etc., eaten the previous night. Depending on digestion rates, her death likely occurred between 11:30 p.m. and 4 a.m. the next day. Based on these 3 forensic indicators, experts believe Choi Soo-hee died before 7 a.m. that day. At that time, her husband, Do-haeng, was still at home and had ample opportunity to commit the crime. The police immediately brought him in for questioning. He claimed he had no idea his wife was cheating. A month before the incident, he'd met the interior designer, her lover, but thought he was just a friend, so he didn't pay much attention. The police searched his belongings and found a note in his sweatpants pocket listing movie titles and video rental store names. One movie was Single White Female, as translated as Single White Woman. This 1992 American psychological thriller depicts a woman killing a man and dumping him in a bathtub, a detail eerily similar to this case. He insisted he'd never watched it and didn't know its plot. The police visited the rental store listed on the note. Records showed he rented the film on May 28, 1994, over a year before the incident, and returned it after 5 days. They discovered he frequently rented movies. 8 months after renting Single White Female the first time, he rented another film from a different store and kept it for a long time before returning it. The police suspected he used these films to study murder methods. Though Do-haeng adamantly denied watching them, the truth might be the opposite. He could have watched them repeatedly. The police then investigated Do-haeng's personal relationships. Surprisingly, he had a strained relationship with his mother-in-law marked by frequent conflicts. Do-haeng was introverted and never fought back when insulted. The police theorized he suppressed his anger and plotted against his wife. On his right arm, they found 3 crescent-shaped marks. They speculated that night, Do-haeng strangled Choi Soo-hee from behind, and as she fought back, she grabbed his arm, leaving nail marks. He adamantly denied the accusation. He admitted his rocky relationship with his mother-in-law and their many arguments, but said it wasn't serious. 2 weeks before the incident, the family vacationed in Guam, a Pacific Island territory of the United States. Back to the case. Do-haeng explained the marks on his arm appeared after his wife and daughter's deaths. When he got home, police blocked him from entering to preserve the scene. Overwhelmed, he banged his hands against the wall and gripped his right arm tightly with his left hand, causing the marks. When asked what he ate that morning, he said, "Bean sprout soup," but the autopsy found no traces of bean sprouts in Choi Soo-hee's stomach. To prove his innocence, Do-haeng volunteered for a polygraph test, which the police agreed to. However, psychologists concluded he failed the lie detector test. 4 days later, on June 16, 1995, police revisited the scene, hoping for more clues. A balcony curtain had fallen to the ground, with a control cord nearby, 5 segments, each less than 8 inches apart. Lab tests revealed cuts and burn marks on the cord's end. In the kitchen, they found a row of clean dishes. They learned Choi Soo-hee typically left daytime dishes in the sink and washed them at night. On the counter were 2 baby bottles, one empty, the other over half full. Choi Soo-hee's mother said she cared for her granddaughter as a newborn, preparing 2 bottles each night and feeding her half a bottle per session across 4 feedings. When the girl returned home, this routine continued. 8 months later, in February 1996, the case went to trial. Prosecutors presented the autopsy report, concluding the deaths occurred before 7 a.m., when the husband was still home. He also failed the polygraph. After a lengthy trial, the court convicted Lee Do-haeng of premeditated murder and sentenced him to death. He denied the charges and appealed. A year later, in September 1996, a second trial began. Prosecutors repeated their evidence. Proving Lee Do-haeng's innocence was simple. They just needed to show the victims died after 7 a.m. when he'd left. His defense attorney, Kim Hong-tae, a skilled, experienced lawyer, requested a Swiss forensic expert, Thomas Kromperher, to challenge the Korean prosecution's forensic claims. The prosecution's forensics team estimated death occurred 6 to 8 hours before the autopsy, based on livor mortis on the victim's right thigh. But no other marks were found elsewhere. Thomas Kromperher noted that when police found Choi Soo-hee, her underwear was pulled to her knees, with the elastic stretched, likely from some force. Kim asked the prosecution's forensic expert, were there facial injuries during the autopsy? They said yes. Notably, this expert wasn't the one who performed the autopsy. Kim countered, "You only saw photos. How can you be certain?" The question silenced the expert, who hadn't examined the body or visited the scene, casting doubt on their testimony. Kromperher argued that rigor mortis timing varies and estimating death from it can be inaccurate. Since Choi Soo-hee and her daughter were submerged in water, temperature could drastically affect rigor. Warmer water speeds up livor mortis. The prosecution never considered water temperature's impact. Choi Soo-hee ate breakfast at 7 a.m. That day, possibly seaweed soup. The absence of bean sprouts in her stomach could mean she didn't eat them. Kim believed the initial autopsy was flawed. Choi Soo-hee's death wasn't before 7 a.m. but between 8 and 8:40 a.m. Her mother said Choi Soo-hee was nearsighted. She had regular glasses and contacts. She wore contacts for work during the day and switched to glasses at night. The autopsy showed she died wearing contacts, suggesting it happened daytime. The guard spotted the fire at 9:10 a.m. and called emergency services. Based on the fire's intensity when extinguished and when smoke appeared, the defense ran a simulation. In an open-space model apartment, they set a fire in the wardrobe. It took 10 minutes for white smoke to escape the window. They estimated the arson occurred between 8:25 and 8:35 a.m., when Lee Do-haeng was at the hospital opening with a solid alibi. The 2 milk bottles on the counter had dried residue. Prosecutors assumed Choi Soo-hee didn't feed her daughter at 6 a.m. based on her habits, but Kim argued she fed her every 3 hours, though it varied. She wasn't meticulous and fed the girl when she cried. Judging death time from this was unreliable. Prosecutors claimed Lee Do-haeng was furious over his wife's affair, giving him a clear motive. Kim called this far-fetched. Why kill his 2-year-old daughter too? Plus, he didn't even know about the affair. After the incident, neighbors reported hearing a couple arguing in another apartment that night, not 708, which was silent. Prosecutors said Lee Do-haeng used a 35-inch curtain cord with 3 thin strands and 5 small knots as the murder weapon, and the arm marks came from his wife's resistance. Kim disagreed. If strangled from behind, she'd grab the cord, not his arm. If a cord was used, it'd leave distinct marks on her neck, but the autopsy didn't mention this. There were two routes to the apartment, one past the guard, who saw no suspicious people, and a locked emergency exit. Outsider involvement seemed unlikely, but the defense added a third route, behind the guard station, an unguarded disability access path. Kim tested it, entering and exiting unnoticed, suggesting an external killer. The initial court ruled the evidence insufficient to convict Lee Do-haeng. He was declared not guilty and freed in court. The verdict sparked outrage and debate in South Korea. Many believed Lee Do-haeng killed his wife and daughter. 2 years later, on November 13, 1998, South Korea's Supreme Court overturned his acquittal, detaining him for retrial. The case dragged on. 8 years after, in February 2003, the Supreme Court heard the case. After heated arguments, they ruled the motive was unclear, the prosecution's death timing lacked evidence, and much relied on speculation. A third party couldn't be fully ruled out. With insufficient proof, doubts remained unresolved, and Lee Do-haeng was again found not guilty, a blow to Korean forensics, outdone by foreign experts, embarrassing prosecutors. South Korea then pushed to advance its forensic technology. The case stirred decade-long controversy. Some say Lee Do-haeng, a surgeon with medical knowledge, rented movies twice to perfect his crime. Others claim he bribed lawyers and experts to win. Kim explained that Lee Do-haeng and Choi Soo-hee weren't rich. They raised $125,000 USD, 150 million won, through loans and assets for the hospital. After trials, he was nearly broke and couldn't afford a lawyer. Believing him innocent, Kim volunteered. Since local forensics favored the prosecution, he hired an overseas expert. No direct evidence tied Lee Do-haeng to the crime. An introvert, he developed severe social phobia over 8 years of trials, avoiding eye contact. Media sought interviews, but he declined, saying, "I hope they catch the real killer now." Thinking, "Of my past pain, I want to criticize the flawed investigation and legal system, but I won't bear my emotions publicly." This unresolved infamous case, dubbed the Korean OJ Simpson case, still sparks discussion. Supporters and detractors of Lee Do-haeng as the killer are nearly split. Everyone has their take on the story. Whether Lee Do-haeng is the culprit, only he may know. What do you think? Who's the real killer? Leave your thoughts below. That's it for today's video. See you in the next one. Bye.